James Joyce was an Irish author. He is known for his diverse and exceptional use of language. He tested out different ways to use symbolism, interior monologue, characters talking to themselves, and stream of consciousness, the uninterrupted, continuous flow of a character's thoughts. Although he lived most of his adult life outside of Ireland, Joyce's Irish experiences are fundamental to his writings. His experiences provide the settings and themes for his works. On February 2, 1882, the world welcomed a great future author, James Augustine Aloysius Joyce. He was born in Rathgar, Ireland, a suburb of Dublin, Ireland. Joyce was the oldest of 10 surviving children in his family. His father had various jobs, including a position as tax collector for the city of Dublin. His mother was a talented piano player. Joyce's father was not very successful, and the family had to move 14 times from the day James was born until he left Ireland. Joyce was educated by Jesuits at Clongowes Wood College and at Belvedere College prior to attending University College, where he studied modern languages. Joyce traveled to Paris to study medicine after graduating from the university. After receiving a telegram, Joyce was ordered to return to Dublin in April 1903 due to the illness and proceeding death of his mother. During his stay, he met Nora Barnacle, the Galway woman who later became his wife. He stayed in Dublin, Ireland until 1904. In August 1904, the first of Joyce's short stories was printed in the Irish Homestead magazine. However, Joyce and Nora left Ireland in October. They were going first to Pola, now Pula, Croatia, where Joyce received a job teaching English at a Berlitz school. After leaving Ireland in 1904, Joyce's last return to Ireland was in 1912, after which he never returned again. 6 months after their arrival in Pola, Joyce and Nora went to Trieste, where they spent most of the next 10 years. They learned the local language of Italian, and it remained their primary language for many years. Joyce wrote and published articles in Italian in the Piccola della Sera newspaper, as well as gave lectures on English literature.
1914 was a crucial year for James Joyce. With the help of Ezra Pound, a poet who was a major figure of the modernist movement in the first half of the 20th century, Joyce's first novel, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, began to appear in a London magazine. In 1914, Dubliners, a collection of 15 short stories, was finally published. Although this was its first year in publication, Dubliners had been completed in 1904. The following year, Joyce completed the only play he ever wrote, Exiles. After the publication of his works, Joyce could begin on the narrative he had been planning since 1907, Ulysses. Although his publications were successful, his family had virtually no money and relied on the help and aid of family and friends as World War I approached. As the war commenced, Joyce, Nora, and their 2 children, Giorgio and Lucia, were forced to leave Trieste and resided in Zurich. People like Harriet Weaver in London and Nora's uncle in Galway often provided them with the basic necessities they needed to get by. Often, the family lived in cramped spaces with little light and poor conditions. Still, Joyce insisted on writing Ulysses. Although Joyce never had a real office or a place to call his own, he continued to write and often included things going on around him as part of the book. This even included his friends from Trieste, Zurich, and Paris, all resembling characters in his novel. Throughout Ulysses, it is most notable and recognizable that Nora's characteristic language and writing becomes the voice of Molly Bloom, the wife of the main character. Though Joyce wanted to settle in Trieste again after the war, Ezra Pound persuaded him to live in Paris for a while. Joyce called this home for nearly 20 years. In 1921, the publication of Ulysses in serial form in the American journal, The Little Review, was brought to a halt when a court banned it as obscene. Shortly after, numerous printers became unwilling to set the text in England, and for a while it looked as though Ulysses would never be published. In 1920, Joyce met Sylvia Beach, an American living in Paris. Beach owned and ran the bookshop Shakespeare & Co. In 1921, after the American ban, Beach offered to publish Ulysses, and finally, on February 2, 1922, Joyce's 40th birthday, the first edition of Ulysses was published. Beach continued to publish Ulysses through 1930.
However, Beach faced many hardships with publishing Ulysses elsewhere, and thus Joyce signed with another publisher for self-success. Ulysses has been called a demonstration and summation of the entire modernist movement. Paul Leon, a close friend and Russian Jewish immigrant, was then responsible for much of Joyce's business transactions for the next 10 years. Leon also played an essential part in the composition and proofreading of Joyce's last work. Joyce found Leon's apartment the center for his studies and meetings. This is where his ideas about Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake began. Throughout the years of 1917 to 1930, Joyce was blind for short intervals, which resulted in Joyce having to endure several eye operations. Also, due to implications with his eye and his schizophrenic daughter, he often traveled to Switzerland for further medical assistance. While suffering from his chronic eye troubles caused by glaucoma, Joyce began working on Finnegan's Wake in March 1923 in Paris. Finnegan's Wake was considered Joyce's last and most challenging work. It was published on May 4, 1939. It was immediately listed as the Book of the Week in the UK and the USA. In 1940, during the time of the Nazi invasions, Joyce fled to the south of France in safety for his family. Leon returned to Paris to salvage Joyce's belongings and put them into safekeeping for the duration of the war. Therefore, much of Joyce's personal possessions and manuscripts survive. After the fall of France in World War II, Joyce returned to Zurich where he became ill. He was diagnosed of having a perforated duodenal ulcer. Joyce died at the age of 59 on January 13, 1941 in Zurich. His last words were, "Does anybody understand?" Joyce was then buried in Flunturn Cemetery. Although two senior Irish diplomats were in Switzerland at the time, neither of them attended Joyce's funeral, and the Irish government subsequently declined Nora's offer to permit the reparation of Joyce's remains. James Joyce's understanding of philosophy, theology, and foreign languages enabled him to use the English language in exciting experimental ways. Joyce's works have been subject to intense scrutiny by scholars of all types. On the other hand, he has also been an important influence on various writers and scholars.